Okay.
Hello, hello. Ooh. Yeah, we're gonna go down to the other room here. There we go. Yeah, we're gonna go down to the other room here. Alright.
Hello?
Hey, hey people, it's Wall here with Wallcraft, and today we are going to be reviewing the DBC structure of the client. We're going to be taking a look at all of the database files that the client uses in order to essentially load everything and display all the information for the game properly. Everything within the game is either contained obviously in the client or in the server, which is loaded into the client. So today we're going to be looking at the files that are specifically within the client and how they're handled. So let's get out of here. And we're going to go into our WoW client folder, and we're going to be taking a look at the... Actually, we're going to go into our server root. We're going to be looking at the DBCs that we extracted from the client. Now, these are all the files that we extracted while creating the server. These are in our 5875 folder. These are all from the client patch files. And what we do is we edit these and then we load them back into our custom patch, our patch 3, for the client to use when we're creating custom stuff. So today we're going to be looking at all of these. We're going to sort them in alphabetical order, and we're going to try and go through the entire list. Some of them contain information that we're not really going to review in any depth, but we're going to, briefly talk about them at least. So sit tight. This lesson will go on for about 3 hours. We'll have a break every 45 minutes or an hour or so. Actually, we'll probably only go on for about 3 hours, depending on how long some of these take to go through. So let's get started here. We're going to load this up. We already have our DBC editor open right now. We're actually going to close out all of these, make sure that they're not edited. In WoW DBX, WDBX editor, you'll see a little asterisk after the file here. So we don't have any asterisks, meaning none of them are unsaved, so we're safe to close them. We're going to go ahead and open file and make sure that we're in the correct directory. We're in our 5875. And I want to get the stream loaded back up on my second screen in case people are asking anything in chat. Having asterisk meaning... Oh, okay, let me mute that. Alright, let's take a look at the chat. ZVXCN's gibberish name says, get that voice changer off. I'm sorry, buddy, that is not a voice changer. You can clearly see that on my YouTube channel. You wish you sounded like me. It's unfortunate you don't. Hex TV says, why in Lesson 1 your PC Vipe 1990? The retro look. That was actually on my old rig, so it would have been Windows 7. But I did have the retro layout, which I did prefer the Windows XP layout. Ever Jr. says, greetings Wall, greetings everyone. Ever Jr. is a huge part of the production here. He is the Blender wizard. He's the one who restored Alpha Karazhan. Everybody give a shout out to Ever Jr. and be sure to check out all of his work. He posts a lot on the WoW modding Discord. Valknut says, keep your feet on the ground. True. Keep your feet on the ground. TD says, good stream, activate Windows. That'll never happen. If somebody sends me a key, I'll activate it, but I will never pay Microsoft $1, I'll tell you that. So, alright. And let me just pull up the Discord chat for this. Alright. Now let's dive right into it. We're going to start through the list alphabetically. As I stated, there's maybe like 20 of these that are really major, and the rest are something that you'll probably never edit. Stuff like animation data. You can edit, and you'll probably use it if you're trying to do like custom model work, animation, stuff like that, but for a lot of these, if you're just dabbling in or you're just dipping your toes into creating custom content, a lot of these are pretty unnecessary, and some of them are basically untouchable. So let's load up our first one. We're going to load it up with the classic 1.12.1 definitions, and the definitions provide all of the column names that we're going to be using. So as you can see, that this is the animation data DBC. It's essentially a collection of about 150, 207 actually, different animations, and it contains the name for the animation for each entry and various flags that are used. Weapon flags, so whether or not a weapon displays or if it has a special animation for the weapon or whatnot. The way that your body will respond, you know, you're using an attack state emote or something. Now, as we're going through these, pop this open. We're gonna open the wowdev.wiki, and we're gonna take a look at the wowdev wiki. We're gonna search for animation data.dbc. Because the flags obviously aren't going to be just clearly listed, so we need to find out what the flags are if we want to use them. These are the known flags. You'll often see them listed on the animation data, or in the WoW wiki, WoW dev wiki here. The flags aren't always known. It's a lot of guesswork, and a big problem is a lot of this research is done for the Wrath of the Lich King client, not the vanilla client, so oftentimes you'll be referencing fields that don't exist past a certain point, if they're even there at all. So it's really hit or miss, but most of the major tables and most of the major DBCs have them listed, so fortunately we're able to find a lot of information from the WoW Dev Wiki. So for the flags for the animation data, we'll have some of them listed here. If the flags, you know, you see them listed, they might be listed in any of these columns here, but might not have all the columns, so be sure you're careful with what you're referencing. Weapon flags and body flags, pretty self-explanatory. The flags listed here would probably be the ones that are listed on the wiki. So whether or not it, you know, hides or shows weapons, or if it has a fallback play that plays backwards, or if it holds the last frame, etc. You can go through all the flags. Obviously, we're not going to talk about every flag for every single DBC, but just so you can be aware of where you find it. Ever Jr. in the chat says he's hoping that Skarn will help him figure out what's wrong with the original Alpha Karazhan, but he's been pretty busy. TV says there are ways to activate for free. Also, old licenses should work if I have one. I've never had a Windows license. I've always used cracked copies up until I got Windows 10 and I just used the unactivated copy. So Ever Jr. is talking about the Alpha Karazhan fixes. Some of the portal and geometry fixes are pretty complex, so Skarn, the head honcho of a lot of the tools, is hopefully going to be taking a look at it, but he's definitely a very busy man, so I don't expect it to occur anytime soon. TD says animation data is also hard-coded in the EXE. Editing this basically does nothing. Yes, unfortunately. A lot of the weapon swing animations and stuff are directly hard-coded into the EXE, so as I said, there's a few DBCs that are basically pointless to edit. You can find out the information, though, from them, but trying to create new information isn't really going to work. This is very much so one of them. It's a big reason why spears have never really been implemented into vanilla WoW, is because the EXE itself has a lot of hard coding for the animation data. And unfortunately, the best you can do is basically make spears function like daggers, but you have to remove daggers at that point. Then it's really janky. So it's the big reason why I didn't actually include spears in the new list of weapons. Glaives work fine because they can copy swords animation data, but yeah, unfortunately spears, they're not really there. Anywho, we're going to be moving on to the next one, animation data. You can find out information from it, but that's about all. Area POI, the next one that we're going to look at. Area POI might require us to load it with Alpha 0.5.3 in WDBX. That's some common theme that you'll see with the older DBCs. We're going to try the 1.12. Okay, the 1.12 loads fine. If it doesn't load, try the Alpha. The Alpha one will load, and that's just because the DBC wasn't updated past Alpha. Usually those contain very little information to begin with. They're just usually like references or masks. So area POI is area points of interest that you'll find around the map, and this is basically when you hover over it on the map, it'll have like a little flag or something like that. You can see all the different names here, so like Airy Peak, Algas Station, a lot of different areas. And those will have like little mini-map icons or world map icons. You'll see the coordinates here. Importance, we're actually going to pull up the wiki, try and get all the definitions for it. Area POI, DBC. So points of interest on the overhead map, including battleground map. This includes text, icons, positioning, and other miscellaneous things. For the flags here, you can take a look at them if you're really interested. This is the little mini-map icons, though, essentially. So all the columns here reference that. The icons that are used, which you can see the icons listed. Whether or not they're important, if they're having normal icons that get displayed at different varying levels. This is a lot of the Wrath of the Lich King information, though, so you can see faction ID if it only appears for a specific faction. Like an Ironforge icon might not appear for Horde. The continent listing, obviously this is going to be, one of the main maps, either 0, 1, or any of the battleground maps typically, but not really for dungeon maps or raid maps. The flags we can see listed on the wiki. Area ID, if it references a -1, that's the parent area ID, otherwise it's a subzone. So something like Airy Peak would be considered the parent ID. Algas Station would have its own area ID, so you'd reference it here in the column. And these are the names for the different locales. So obviously we only have the ENUS as that's what we extracted. You could definitely find ones that are completed with all the different locales if you're trying to make a multilingual server, but for custom servers that's not really a thing, so I only use obviously the English. If they have a description on mouse over or anything like that, that'll be listed in the description column. And world state ID, actually don't know what that references, we'll find out. World state, most likely the value defines the icon, so if the icon is part of the world state, I guess. I'm not really certain on that. This is something that you would add if you're trying to really fully flesh out the world maps or the mini-maps. Pretty self-explanatory, though. So, moving on to the next one. Ever Jr. asks, what kind of icon? Yeah, we'll be able to find some of the icon data. But basically, like, if you see, like, a little red flag on the map, or there's, like, 6 or 7 different icons, really, that get used. Some of them even, I think, aren't even hard-baked into the world map. They're, like if you see a dock, I believe in Elwyn, and you can go check an Elwyn map, there's like little dock icons. Area table. On the next one, area table is very important. This one is going to be used quite a lot if you're editing any maps in Nugget. And these are the area flags that get assigned in Nugget. So if you want to create custom areas, like what I have outside by Ironforge Airport, it's a good example. Ironforge Airport doesn't specifically have an area flag or an area name. You can look at airport. You can see that I have the custom entry because there is no Ironforge Airport. So we have, I usually keep my entries rounded off, starting at a 0, nearest 0 for the highest place. So obviously it goes from 3,400 to 4,000. Some of them need to be in tight-knit numeric order, but this isn't one of them. So just for convenience sake, we start at 4,000. This is often too because if you import anything from TBC or Wrath of the Lich King, they'll obviously be in numeric order leading off from vanilla. So a lot of TBC zone data would be like 3,500, 3,600 stuff. So I usually try and leave a little bit of space just in case. Would be smarter to even go higher incrementally, but so continent ID, this is referencing the map that the area is in. Parent area ID references the entry for the parent area, so we can see for like Icewing Bunker, the parent area is 2597. This will reference one of the ID columns. If we were to go to 2597, it would be Alterac Valley. Yep, Alterac Valley, and that is map 30. If the parent area ID is 0, that means that it is a parent. If it's not a 0, it means it references a different entry in here and is a subzone. The area bit pulled up on the wiki. This is essentially just a ordered list though for the different area IDs for area bit, so you can see that they all go in order, and just try and keep them in order so that the game client recognizes. We're going to pull up the flags used though. So area table.dbc. And we're going to go to the area table flags here, and a lot of these flags are pretty important. For instance, like if the zone has breath particles while you're standing there, you see your breath. That's used for like snowy zones, Dunmarone, Naxxramas, Razorfent Downs, and Winter Spring. Breath particle override parent means whether or not the subzone overrides the parent. On map dungeon, this is only used for one development map, so it's not really used. But if you want to, let's say, enable trade channel for that subzone, you would have to flag it in this table. And a lot of these tables, as I stated, for the DBCs are reflected within the server structure, so obviously area table is one of them. A lot of them aren't, but a lot of them are. Make sure we have all our columns, so anything that's in this DBC is basically going to have to be within the server template as well. So you can see the flags, the zones, all the stuff essentially is a copy in here. And that's so the server knows how to handle it, but this is for the client to handle it, so they want to be a one-to-one match. If a zone has specific music, you'll have it listed here, obviously. The sound provider preferences are preset sound provider preferences that will be listed in a different DBC. Don't really worry too much about those. If you need, just copy them from a different line. Ambience ID is specific noises in the background, same with the zone music. Intro sound isn't used for many things, but it's used for a few things. I believe walking over the bridge in Stormwind to cue the music to start playing. In fact, if we'll go to search Stormwind. Yeah, Stormwind City has 61. This means the intro sound gets played at a specific part of entering the city. The intro sound is played at the bridge, and this will have like a trigger for it. Exploration level essentially determines what level we should be exploring it and awards the appropriate experience. So Stormwind City obviously is level 10. The Sea of Cinders would be in burning steps. So that's 56, much higher level, obviously. Altar of Storm, same deal there. So yeah, that just determines, exploration level just determines what level is appropriate to be there, so we can determine what experience we're getting. So we're scrolling over here. We're just going to skip, obviously. These are just the locales. Area name mask essentially just provides that as well. Faction group mask is for specific factions, whether or not it's going to be contested, horde, or alliance in the zone. That just essentially changes it for the client to see who controls the zone, if it's alliance, if it's horde, if it's neutral. So like alliance would be listed at 2. Undercity is 4, so 2 is alliance, 4 is horde, everything else is neutral essentially. In fact, I don't think there's anything else that's not 2 or 4. I'm gonna sort and check though. So yeah, just 2 or 4. 2 being alliance, 4 being horde. Mason Fabian says he made a silly add-on related to the area names where I replaced all the music with Elder Scrolls music. Pretty neat. That's actually wild. You should definitely link that. That's pretty cool. Elder Scrolls has some of the best music. Yeah, excited to hear what the next Elder Scrolls music is, because that's always a huge point. I play WoW, I turn off the music. I don't even listen to the music, unfortunately, just because I'm doing a billion other things typically. Alright, and we're going to move on to the next one. And area trigger. Area trigger is a very important one. Area trigger essentially determines the different area triggers. Area triggers being when you walk into a specific spot on the map and something happens, whether you get teleported or, you know, something specifically happens. These are the listings for all of them. Now, obviously the area trigger itself is just listed here. It doesn't really tell you what it does. But if you were to... this was a problem that we actually had with our Warsong Gulch tournament this weekend, was because I had placed the lobby on Ashara Crater, a map which doesn't have any area triggers. It actually breaks area triggers for the client, and area triggers won't work at all for anything until you reload the client. That's something I gotta fix for the development map and for a few other maps that I'm using, because they don't have area triggers. But area triggers, anytime you have to walk into a specific coordinate for something to happen, it's going to be listed here. This is a table that if I recall, needs to be in specific order for the area trigger. So you can add stuff. Actually, I might be wrong there, because there's different listings here that go out of order. Oh yeah, that's what it is. Area triggers need to be listed in the order of continent ID. The primary key is actually continent ID, not ID. So if you are creating new area triggers, this is a tricky one to edit, because you're going to have to export the file to CSV and then open it up in Notepad++ and edit it that way. You're going to have to insert the line specifically into the correct continent ID order. So if I wanted to, let's say, create an area trigger for 309, I couldn't just add a new row at the end, because it would break all the area triggers, or that one simply wouldn't work. What I would need to do is export it to CSV and insert the line, and then re-import it from CSV so the line is in the correct position. And that's because continent ID is the primary key used. So EverJunior wants to see how it works and how to edit it, please. Basically, if I wanted to edit area triggers, I would export. And I'm just going to export it to CSV. And then we would open it up in Notepad++, and we'll see ID, continent ID. Continent ID is the second column. That's the one we're looking for. So let's say we wanted to create an area trigger for map 70. Continent ID obviously references the map. If we wanted to create an area trigger on map 70, we would have to copy, and then we would have to paste in a new row, and we'd want it to be in order for the area trigger, so we'd paste it right in at the end. So make a new row on 70. And then we would change the ID, and that's why you see some of them are like 50,000s. That's because those are my custom ones for Wallcraft. We're just gonna say 50,018. I don't know if that's actually correct, but we're not gonna save it. You can see 50,001 is an area trigger that I had added to map 44, which previously didn't have any area triggers. Map 44 being Stormwind Jail, if I recall. I can't remember. But yeah, so we would insert the line this way, and then we would save it, which we're not actually gonna save it. But then we would save it and make sure that obviously it's the last in the order for that specific continent ID. And we set the coordinates X, Y, and Z. And the last column is radius. So if it has a circular radius, we would set the radius on what we want it to be. This is just a raw number. It's not referencing anything from spell radius or anything. If it's a box, we would set the box length, the box width, and the box height. This is, I can't remember what these numbers are, if they're floats, but we could use box, and then box yaw essentially tilts the box. Typically it's just easier to use radius, but yeah, you could use box for some things if you're doing like a big instance portal or something like that. But then yeah, we would save it after inserting it, and then we would open up our WDBX and we would import from CSV. We would override all, we would take newest, we would select our file, and then we would hit load, and it would override everything with the CSV file that we had edited. KKND says he's genuinely sorry for being late. Yes, have a seat. You're tardy, it's fine. No, you know, tune in at your own convenience, obviously. So don't worry about that. We're just leaving off from the area trigger DBC. We're reviewing all the DBCs today. So that's about it for area triggers. Just like I said, this one's tricky to edit, so you're gonna have to make sure that you do that export import trick. Otherwise, they simply won't work. Attack animation kits. This is something that we're not really going to be using. I believe it has to be loaded in alpha, but we're going to try the classic. Okay. So attack animation kits basically determine attack animations, but as TD mentioned earlier, these are basically hard baked into the client, so there's not a whole lot of editing that can be done for this. You can change flags, but yeah, trying to make new rows isn't really going to do anything, unfortunately. So attack animation references the animation ID that we spoke about in the animation data DBC. The attack type determines what type of attack it is. You can find a reference on the WoW wiki. Basically, like 1 is one-handed slashing or stabbing. Like 5 would be like a two-handed piercing attack. Essentially, it determines the type of a weapon swings for the weapon. There's essentially like 8 of them. There's like one-handed slashing, one-handed piercing, one-handed like crushing, something like that. Actually, I don't even think crushing is one. But yeah, like one-handed and two-handed weapon styles. And unfortunately, I've never had luck editing this one or getting this one to work. Wall, did you finally fix Feral Leap? There's nothing wrong with Feral Leap. People have complained previously, Feral Leap, that it interrupts movement packets sent from the client after using it. Just reissue the movement command. That's exactly how intercept and charge works. That's how any type of physical movement like that works. It's not broken, that's just the client. That's how the client handles it. When you use Feral Leap, all you have to do is just hit the movement key while in air, and you'll continue moving when you hit the ground. Otherwise, you'll just stop. I think he's just fucking with me, though. I'm pretty sure he's joking about Farah there, so. He's a funny guy. Ever Junior asks, does attack animation kit, does it connect to spells? No, this would be connected to item subclasses. This would be referenced in item subclasses, essentially, or item classes, which we'll talk about later. But for this one, just know that if you want to edit this one and you manage to actually get somewhere with it, let me know. Most of it's hard baked into the client, so I've never had any luck changing attack animations. Unfortunately, it's just baked into the vanilla client. Here's the listing actually for them. So this is attack animation types. This would have been that column that I was talking about. One-handed main swing, one-handed piercing, two-handed long pierce, two-handed long swing, two-handed tight swing would be a T. That's like a fast two-handed swing. Offhand swing, offhand pierce. These are the 8 IDs that were referenced there. Betu says spam left and right click while doing it. That's what I do while charging out warrior. Yeah, once you understand like the things that you have to really do to optimize your usage of spells in vanilla, it just becomes second nature. Like if you're a warrior and you charge and you don't reissue the movement command, you won't move after that. Or if you get polymorphed and you're running and you're holding the run key and then the polymorph breaks, you won't start running automatically until you reissue the movement. So vanilla client can feel clunky until you master it, but once you do, it's totally fine. There's really nothing wrong. In fact, it's probably even a little bit better that way, just because you have to reissue it, so you're getting guaranteed actions. Moving on. Ever Jr. says, can you please make it clarify a connection between certain DBCs and databases, please? Yes. I'll make sure that they're as clear as possible. Unfortunately, though, because we're going alphabetically, some of these are going to reference stuff way at the bottom. So we're going to try and interconnect all of them as best as possible. Moving on to auction houses. This is just the enumerations for all the auction houses. Stormwind, Darnassus. The Alliance auction house, the ones that are listed Horde and Alliance are Ironforge and Orgrimmar. Those were the original auction houses. The other cities actually didn't have auction houses. So we have Stormwind, this would be Ironforge, Darnassus, Undercity, Thunder Bluff, Orgrimmar, and then Blackwater. Blackwater being the Goblin neutral auction houses. This is just the ID listings. The faction ID refers to the faction template databases. And this would be obviously human, dwarf, night elf, undead, tauren, and then orc and goblin here. Deposit rate is the deposit fee for creating auctions. You can see that the goblin one is significantly more expensive. It's 5 times more expensive. Consignment rate is the fee for purchasing items on the auction house. For all of them, they're just 5. The goblin was the only one that is expensive, and the rest of the columns are irrelevant. So moving on to the next one. Ever Jr. asks in the Discord, he says, sorry, will be duplicate. The question here, does area trigger somehow connect to the database? Yes, area trigger is connected to the database. We can reference that, in fact, right now. Area trigger is an important one, so we'll definitely take some time to look over this. If you take a look here at the server databases, the area trigger has its own template. Obviously, this is a copy of area trigger DBC. This one, I don't believe needs to be in order. Yeah, the one in the server doesn't need to be in order, so you can just tack them on right at the end. You can see the ones that we've got set up. We have an additional 14 here. This is just a copy of the area trigger DBC. The area triggers then are referenced in things like area trigger teleport, area trigger tavern, area trigger battleground entrance, area trigger involved relation. So if we wanted to create a new portal that enters into a new map instance, let's say we added a new instance to the game, we want to make, an in-game place where you walk into and you can zone in, we would add it on the area trigger DBC, and we would do that trick, like I said, with the export import. We would make sure that it's added to the area trigger template in the server database, and then we would add it to the area trigger teleport. And these have all the listings here, so we can see. We did go over this in a previous lesson, but we're going to take a look at it now because it's connected to it. So this just has all of the IDs listed in numerical order. This determines what patch it's available at. This is the name, and this is the message that is played for when you try and enter but fail. So if there's a condition set up, a required condition or a required level, and you fail to meet those conditions or that required level, you'll see this message play here. This is the target map that the area trigger leads to. So you set up the area trigger in the game world, and then you define where it goes to with the coordinates. So this area trigger 45 would be the entrance to Scarlet Monastery Graveyard. This would be on the open world game map in the Scarlet Monastery lobby. And then this goes to target map 189, which is Scarlet Monastery instance. And this is for the graveyard, and then this is the coordinates of where you are put out. Yeah, so that's about all the information that's basically needed for making area triggers. You add it to the area trigger database, the DBC. You add it to the database in here, and then you create the teleport listed in here. So let's take a look here. Blackrock Spire exit. Obviously the target map is map 0, which is the main continent, and this is the coordinates of where you're put out here. The Blackrock Spire entrance would lead to map 229, which would be Blackrock Spire. You need to be minimum level 45 to enter. So you can see on the message description, if we're not 45, this will be put out in a string to the client. And it takes us to map 229 at these exact coordinates. So as long as you have the entry listed in here and the area trigger template and within the DBC. So we'll open that back up. As long as you have those 3 things correct and you've inserted this row correctly into the DBC, it'll all work. Biggest issue people have, though, that they'll run into is that they don't insert the row correctly. They try and put it on at the end, and it just simply doesn't work. What DBC that references the map template? So your target map, map ID. So you can find it in the DBCs or in the server database here. I'm just going to the server database. These are all the maps. I'll list them in order here. So these are all the maps. These are the maps referenced in that. So we see 229 Blackrock Spire. 189 would be Scarlet Monastery. So on and so forth. Yes, map DBC, which is also a copy of the map template. And we'll get to the map DBC, but yes, that's map DBC and map template. They're both copies of each other. Moving on to the next one, bank bag slot prices. Bank bag slot prices are the price for purchasing the bank bag slots. You can see them listed in the client here. I don't believe that there's one connected to this. Nope. So it's contained within the client, and the server will, if you see a DBC that's missing from the server template, that means that the server just simply pulls it directly from the 5875 folder or from the client data folder. A lot of these don't need to be listed within the server. It would just be redundant. Some of them do need to be listed and they need to be copies, but that's how VMaNGOS works. All of them could be imported into the server database, and then you wouldn't even really need the client files, but that's just not how it's done. Ever Jr. says, can you show how to fully make an area trigger portal fully, please? It's like completely no information on the internet. It would be a really nice mini guide to reference. I mean, I just gave all the data, but yeah, here, I can make one for you. I needed to make one anyways for a shard crater. So, let's see. Load up our dev server. This is our testbed server that we have set up for the lessons here. That's going to take a while to load because I've got everything all running here. See, I'm in a shard crater right now on this character. And this was our Warsong Gulch lobby. fly real quick over to the entrance. This is the entrance for the battleground, and area triggers should be set up in here, but I've not assigned them yet. The portals should be right here. I'd actually have to edit them in Nugget, so I could do that real quick. In fact, I probably should, just for the sake of continuity. Let's take a look at it in Nugget real quick. See if we can get this to load. I've been having issues with UIDs. I need to run a UID fix, but that's neither here nor there. Do that at a later point. Shark Crater. Okay, here it is. A Shark Crater. Select this tunnel here, and it should have a doodad set with a portal. Yeah, it's this one. So this is the doodad set. You can see the portal attachment, and if we animate, you can see it's glowing red. We're gonna see if there's a different one with yeah, okay, the one in the back here. We're going to use the one in the back. We could use the one in the front. We're going to use the one in the back. Looks a little bit more clean. Make sure that that's set so that we have a portal to reference. The portals are just visual. They're not actually components of the area triggers, but obviously we want it looking good, so we're going to use them. And find where the horde one is. I can't remember where it is. I believe it's that cave over there, though. Oh, nope, it's this one. At least it should be. I don't know if there's actually doodad sets referenced in this one. Oh. Reload tile. No, this cave doesn't have any doodad sets referenced. This cave is static. Let's see. For the horde, I might need to add a different cave to use. Yes, I don't believe any of these have portals or portal visual. Yeah, these don't have any doodad sets. Either way, we're just going to do the other one for now. It don't matter. Reload that tile, just in case we change something. I'm just trying to remember where we had that horde cave. To the entrance. I believe we were using this one, but I'll have to go through, assign a portal and Blender to it. Either way. We're actually going to exit, return to menu, we're going to reload the map, and just change that real quick once again, to make sure that we haven't changed anything. And this is, again, this is just visual, so that we have the correct aesthetic. Yes, one. We're going to save change tiles. Exit Nugget. Going to go into our client, world, maps, PvP zone 2, no. PvP zone 2, I can't recall. It's gotta be though. Okay, yeah, it's PvP zone 2. So we're going to load that into our client. Maps. Yeah, this would have been a shark crater. Load that in from our Chromie client that we use to hook into Naga to edit these maps. That's just a standard Rat the Lich King client. Load all of them. Jamie asks, what Windows variant are you running? Windows 10 Professional, something like that. Okay, so here's the portal. You can see that we now have a portal inside this cave where previously we didn't have one. You can tell where the portal was because of the odd color lighting. It's very easy to reference if the portal's not set there. So what we're going to do is we're going to get our GPS, and we should be using a box, but we're just going to use a radius because it doesn't really matter. So we're going to walk a little bit behind the portal just to make sure that our radius extends out in a circle. It's not a huge deal. Like I said, we should be using a big box here, but I'm not going to do all the box coordinates right now. So we have our GPS that we're going to have to copy over. And we're just going to copy it in Notepad. Let's close this as we don't need it. 55.480.166.223. And I just do floats to the third decimal. For the Z, you always want to make sure that the Z is higher than the Z given, because otherwise you do risk falling through the floor. So you do 6, we'll actually do 4 instead of 3. I'll just round up a little bit. Orientation isn't really necessary for radius, but we're just going to still get that anyways. And make sure these are separated by commas. They don't need to be, but just for our sake. So I'm going to exit the game. We're going to shut down the server. So we're going to need to open up our exported area trigger template that we just exported. Our Ashar crater map is 37, so we're going to have to go down in the second column and make sure that we're putting it in the right order. So you can see there's no 37 listed, but that's the map that we need. Our last listing for it was 13, so we're going to use 14. 37. Actually, it's easier if we just copy a row and edit the row, so we don't mess anything up. 437. And now we do our coordinates. This is actually radius, not orientation. So for the radius, we're just going to use 10. Make it nice and easy. And then we're going to open up our area trigger. This is the exact steps we just described. We're going to import from the CSV that we just edited. We're going to override all. We're going to take newest. Succeeded. We're going to make sure that we save it. And then we're going to want to copy that exact information over to the area trigger template. And this one can be tacked right onto the end. So what we're going to do is we're just going to make a new row. Ah, crap. Just do there we go. Make sure that we have our correct build. Map 37, and I'm just going to shrink this down and move it to the other monitor so I can see it. So we have 115548 negative 166.223 313.664 and radius of 10. Like I said, we should be using box, but we're just using radius for the sake of convenience. And now that we have that set up, we're going to set our area trigger teleport. We're going to create a new row, and we're going to, obviously we have the other ones listed in here, so use the same number. Must be Ashara. Actually, I have the entrances as well already created, so this is Crater Alliance Exits. Only the Alliance may use this portal. And we're going to set required level 60. We actually don't even have the condition assigned for Alliance. Let's take a look here. Required condition, so we don't even have the correct condition, but that's fine. Now, because we are adding this portal to Ashara Crater, the target map needs to be the coordinates for the open world map, which would be map 1. So we're going to go get that GPS coordinates on the map. Chat, copy, paste, add-on to be able to copy numbers straight from the game instead of typing it. Yeah, I'd probably better use it. It's fine though. Go trigger. We're going to go to the outside trigger. This is the Horde trigger. We need the Alliance. Should be trigger, I think 4 or 2. I can't remember. Yeah, so 2. To set up our trigger. We want to make sure that it's putting us outside of the portal, so we're going to get the GPS from here. And we are going to... I'm actually just going to move this over to the other monitor while I copy this over. So the target map is map 1. We're on Kalimdor continent, and we're going to go 2751.021. You can't see this right now, but I'm just entering these values. I'll drag back over after I'm done. 185.601. We always go slightly higher than the Z axis and make sure that our orientation is set. 1.594. So you can see now we have the area trigger teleport set up, and we're going to want to reload the server. You can't hot reload database if you've added a new row, so after we load this, we're going to have a quick break. I need a smoke and a drink. And I might need to actually hop over to Alliance. I don't have conditions set up, but, you know. So now we should be able to zone on in and zone back on out. Let's see if it worked. Nope, hitting the brick wall. Nice. I probably messed up the coordinates. Let's see if we do though. Go trigger 50014. Go trigger 50014. Okay, so we do have the trigger set up with the coordinates. Could just be because we loaded into a map that doesn't have enough. Could be the radius that's messed up. Could be... Oh, you know what it is. It's because I don't have it loaded into the client. There we go. Make sure that this is saved, and we're going to have to load our triggers into the client. Our area trigger. And yeah, putting it into the client's MPQ. Nice and easy. Beautiful. And this will fix the issue with the Warsong Gulch flags, too. Uh-oh. Yeah, see, that is one issue, though, that we have to make sure that we avoid. You can see is that we have the area triggers set directly on top of each other. So when I zone in, I actually land directly on top of the trigger. So what I can do is just simply lower the radius, and that should fix it. So we're going to lower the radius for this. We're just going to do it down to 6 for now. Just say 6, and we have to do the same for the template as well. 37, we're going to set it to 6. And for this, we can actually reload area trigger template. Can we? Oh, can't reload area triggers, so we gotta reboot the server. Make sure that's saved. Add it to the client patch. And by lowering the radius, hopefully I land outside of it. If not, I just have to move it slightly then. Yeah, always make sure your Lodex MPQ editor is closed before loading the client, or at least the patch isn't loaded, otherwise it won't load the patch. Nah, still on top of it. That's fine though. That just means I gotta move it. So what we can do is GM fly on, go trigger. Okay, tele dev. As Britalny told me the other day, if you go into a map with no area triggers, it breaks all area triggers. So we're going to teleport to a map with no area triggers, and we can now go here to a map with with a trigger that we need. So we're actually going to move all the way further back and just get GPS coordinates updated. Do this on my second screen here. And we're just updating the coordinates for the trigger here. This is the trigger we just added. We're going to leave the other one untouched. And reboot the server here. Oh, I see what the problem is. I missed the decimal here. There we go, and make sure it spits us out on the other side. There we go. So yeah, you can see the gap is just right, pretty precise. I could even move the exterior portal, but that's not a big deal. So there we go. We've added an area trigger to this map, and that should actually fix all of the issues that we were having previously with the Warsong Gulch lobby. So this was the lobby we set up for the tournament this week with Warsong Gulch. Just basically sending players here. I have a special spell design. You see, ally. I'll talk to the pre-made gear vendor. I created a special spell using essentially the same scripting for the Death's Trial mode, but with no flagging, where I can take players from GM Island and just teleport them directly. It will determine what race they are, and it'll send them to the correct area, strip all their gear. So as a Horde, I get sent to the Horde starting area. All of my gear and items, besides my permanent items and mounts and whatnot, get deleted. This allows me to make sure that I can load players in without, you know, bags full of free action potions and shit, or max gear, since we just use tier 2 and no crazy consumes. Evan Jr. says, thank you all for showing this. You rock. I will reference to this video as a fulfilled guide about area triggers. Definitely, definitely. It's one of the more complex things to edit. It took me a little while to figure it out fully. Mostly the map order being the primary key isn't really shown in the DBCs, so I couldn't figure out why it wasn't working for me initially when I was making stuff for like Karazhan and Stormwind Prison and shit like that. But yeah, it's basically just because of this. It's the map order being the primary key, so you just got to make sure that you do that export-import trick. The rest is pretty self-explanatory. Either way, we're going to take a short break. We're going to just chill out here for today and probably go on until about 5 Eastern time today, so another 2 hours. We're just going to keep reviewing DBCs, however many we can get through today. We're going to close this out and load up the next one before we take our break. We're going to be talking about skill line ability. This is a very important one, so stay tuned, and we'll be right back. Alright people, we are back, and we're going to be reviewing the skill line ability DBC. Let me just take a look at the chat and see what I've missed. Valknut says, music is looking good. Yeah, Buckethead, man. Buckethead slays. Mook messaged me, says he can't hand in a quest and choose the throwing weapon. I think it's trying to give me 200 of throwing weapons individually. Stealing supplies is the name, so let's take a look at that real quick. And that would be because the quest is giving him throwing weapons. Throwing weapons no longer have stacks on Wallcraft. So we're going to take a look here. To our quest template. Stealing supplies. Quest rewards. Should be the first one, but we're going to make sure. Let's pull this up on Classic DB. Silver Star. Yeah, 3463, so we're going to have to change this to 1. As you can't actually hold 200. And we should be able to hot reload this. Oh man, Jamie from Turtle Wow just sent me a Windows activation key, so we're gonna get that activated after the stream here. Much appreciated, man. Huge thanks. That's actually so nice. Thank you very much, man. We'll get that done right after here. And make sure we didn't crash. Sometimes reloading a database can crash the server. It's usually NPC creature ones, so let him know. Much appreciated, Jamie. That's huge. Thank you very much. Alright, let's delve back into it. This is the skill line DBC, the skill line ability. This one is referenced on the server as well with skill line ability. Skill line ability determines what skill line a spell exists within. So let's say Blood Rage, the warrior spell that generates rage, that would have a skill ID assigned for the skill for the defensive skill. Protection, I should say, not defensive. The protection tree talent ability. So we can take a look here at the enumerations for all of them. We're actually going to pull that up with a different DBC here. And that's the skill line. Actually, we're way out of order too. We shouldn't be reviewing skill line right now, but we'll go with it. So let's pull this up as well. Skill line. These are all referenced in the skill line DBC. Skill line ability essentially pertains to the specific specs or trees that they belong to. It could be either a class's spec or something like riding, languages, basically any groups of the skills that you learn. Even the pet ones, you know, pets for cat, wolf, even Doomguard for like warlock stuff, Voidwalker, succubus, cloth gear, leather gear, shields, basically anything that's listed in the skill page, or if it's not listed, might not be listed in the client, but it exists to a skill line. Essentially, this is what that's covering. So we should dip back to this later, but we're just going to talk about it right now. Skill line abilities denote all of these spells and what they belong to. And this DBC also references the restrictions for races and classes. Excluded classes, excluded races, I don't think are used in the vanilla DBCs. So let's just make sure that clear sort. So yeah, exclude race isn't used. Exclude class is only used for one thing, and that's actually a custom one that I've created. So it's not actually used in the vanilla DBCs. I shouldn't even be using it like that. This is basically an inverse class mask for the excludes. I should just reference all of the classes it can be learned by instead of the ones that it can't be learned by. But either way, what you need to know is that this needs to be correct. This is very important. If this isn't correct, it will crash the client. Essentially, the client cannot load if the data is incorrect for this. If a spell isn't listed in this, it will just be appearing under the General tab instead. So, if it's not listed, that's fine, but if it's incorrectly listed between the server and the client will crash. So this has to be correct in relation to the server database for skill line ability. So, as long as these match, it shouldn't be a problem. If they don't match, though, you will have issues. Minimum skill line rank is for stuff like blacksmithing professions, or any professions really. So you'll see like if a spell has a profession listing, or if it has a specific thing that it needs to be ranked in order to learn, it will have a minimum one. Superseded by spell is a spell that comes after it within the chain, and if it's listed under here with superseded by, that means the client will remove the previous rank and only show the highest rank. This is typically something that you'll see within warrior and rogue spells. Like you can't cast a lower level spell for a warrior. You can only cast the highest rank. That's how you essentially determine that, if it's listed under the superseded by. Acquire method is a flag. It's either going to be 0, 1, or 2. Acquire method essentially denotes how you learn this. If it's 0, it means that you learn it like normally from a trainer or something like that, or really wherever you learn it. Could even be a quest or usually a trainer. If it's a 1, it means that you learn the ability automatically upon learning the relevant skill. So we can look at skill 186. It's superseded by these 2 spells, but it's learned with 1. So 86 would probably be like a riding one, something like that. Let's take a look here. Actually not seeing that. 86 probably got scrapped. Huh. It chose the wrong one to look at. Okay, let's look at a different one. Acquire method, we're going to sort by. Back down to the bottom here. In fact, it might even be 2 that's automatically learned, I can't recall. I should look it up on the wiki. I can't remember off the top of my head. Skill line ability. Let me see. Line ability. Acquire method. Okay, so 0 is learned by trainer. 1, the skill is automatically obtained, or the spell is obtained when you learn the skill. And 2 is used for racial skill spells. So if it's a racial, it's essentially automatically learned when you learn the skill, or the racial skill. So like each racial has its own category of skills. Like a troll racial, the skill would be called racial troll. And if the spell is listed there, it means you automatically learn it upon learning that skill. So these would all be racials. As you can see, the acquire method is 2. So let's just take a look here. 333 should be something relevant because it's got a trivial skill line assigned, which means this is the rank low and rank high. This means when it becomes obsolete. Essentially, when you can learn it would be 80 for rank low, and then once it becomes once it becomes basically gray and no longer gives you skill points for training it or crafting it, whatever. So 333 would be enchanting. So yeah, you can see enchanting. We'll go back down here. We'll sort acquire method. try and find the one that we were looking at there. Yeah, sometimes you have to clear it and then do it again. Just for WDBX, it's kind of wonky. So anything you see here for the acquire method of 1 is usually the initial spell. And this is because for professions in particular, the skill book for professions, when you open up the book, if you don't have any spells learned for it, it doesn't open up like at all. So the way that the client handles it is that you will always automatically learn some sort of spell upon learning a profession. The initial spell, obviously you don't learn like your first one from the trainer, you automatically get it when you learn the skill. So for like enchanting, the one that was listed for enchanting, in fact we'll sort here to make it easier. Go back down to 1. So 333 with the trivial skill line 80 and 120. This would be for the learning it for the journeyman profession of enchanting. 7428. Take a look at classic DB to see what spell that is. Spell equals 7428, and that is enchant bracer minor deflect. So upon learning the journeyman, this will be unlocked for enchanting. So continuing to go through here, we actually probably missed this one, minimum skill line rank. Let's clear all of our sorting here. Sort largest to smallest, go back up to the top here. So minimum skill line rank is the minimum required to learn that specific one for the skill line. Most of these again are professions. 185, take a look at, is cooking. So in order to learn that specific spell, you would need a minimum skill line rank in cooking. Clear that, redo it. So 185, you would need 110 cooking in order to learn this recipe. 2546. Look that up here again. Bias database. So dry pork ribs would need a minimum level of 110 in cooking in order to learn. It's orange, and again, this isn't for the trivial ones. It's not a hard set. It's the way that the system determines when it's orange and when it becomes not orange, or gray I should say. So you could even know it before 120, but it's going to be a minimum rank of 110, so you have to be 110 cooking, and it starts converting between orange to gray between these ranges, but it can exist outside of those ranges. Character points we're going to reference on the wiki here. Character points, I'm actually not sure if that's even really used. Not that I can recall if it's even used. I've never seen it myself. Let's see. Make sure we got our sorting cleared. Yeah, so character points isn't used in vanilla for neither of these. And number skill ups doesn't seem to be used either, so these last three columns are deprecated. Likely they never did anything with them, but they still exist in the client. Let's see. Misty asked, thank you for doing this so much for the community. So would 1 be an example from, say, you learn leatherworking, you get some starting recipes? Yes, that's correct. For the acquire method of 1, if you learned leatherworking and it had an acquire method of 1, it means it would automatically teach it. In fact, we'll sort by the ID here. And let's take a look. Sort smallest to largest. Clear the sorts for the other columns here. And if you go all the way down to the bottom here, you can see all of the new ones that I've been adding for stuff for skill line of 6, which, what is skill line 6? Frost. Okay, so this would be the new frost spells. Oops. So the last four rows, you can see that we added some new frost spells. So let's take a look at an example here. Frost, this would have been, let's see, spell template. 35775, I believe it was Frozen Orb. We'll take a look though. Search by ID. Yeah, so 35775 would have been the new Frozen Orb spell that we just added. You can see that it's within the Frost skill line. So this will appear in our Frost spec under our character's skill books. It's restricted to class mask 128, which is a hexadecimal flag. We're going to convert that. So it's a decimal flag for hex, which is flag 80. And you can see we have all the listings right here. So class mage is hex 80, which is 128. And this determines that only class mage can learn it. And the minimum skill line requirement is only 1. It means that you don't need any skills in Frost to learn that. And it's because your spec skills don't have any skills that you can level. This originally did exist in Alpha, where you would like be able to level up Fire, Frost, or Arcane as a mage, basically, but they scrapped that with Vanilla. I believe it existed still in Alpha, though, at that time. Yeah, there's no other data for just basic spells. So if you're adding a new spell, you basically just need to add the skill book that it belongs to, which would be 6 for Frost for Frozen Orb, and make sure that you include the correct class. It's not even really necessary to include the correct class, just because the way that the trainers work in-game, but it's definitely, it's better practice to do so. That's how Blizzard did it, so that's how we do it. For spells in particular, though, it's not super necessary. It's just better practice, and to make sure there's no weird discrepancies. This one, spell 555, this would have been for skill line 373. 555 would be Shaman's Feral Spirits, so this would have been enhancement. And we didn't include the class mask. We should have, though. Probably should go back and do that, so if we wanted to, we could update that. In fact, we will right now. And just confirm that 555 is in fact Feral Spirits, but I'm absolutely certain it is. 555, Feral Spirits, yes. And that is for the Shaman class, which is 64 for 40 hexadecimal, so 64. And just make sure that that's, you know, correct. We got to make sure that that's updated in our skill line ability for the server as well. So go to the bottom, 64. And just make sure that that's correct there. Otherwise, other classes would be able to learn it, but because they're not assigned on the trainers for those other classes, it's not really possible for a player to learn it. If I wanted to, I could leave that out for the class mask, and that way, if I was testing, debugging something, I could learn that spell on like a warrior without any issues. If I were to manually train it myself as a GM, it also bypasses that, so it's really not relevant. It's just better practice. Ever Junior asks, I guess you can open the second DBC in a new tab instead of switching between them in one tab. It makes previous one DBC to reset the default position. Are you able to open them in a new tab? I used to be able to do that with my DBC editor. I don't know if WDBX can actually do that, unfortunately. Every time I try and load, it just automatically loads into the same one. I'm sure there's probably a way to load 2 copies, but it's not really a concern. I'm just so used to it by now. But, you know, typically you're only working with one at a time, or if you switch back and forth, you just do the search. Moving on, we're going to go to the last skill line stuff for all the skill, and then we're going to jump back up to the top. I know it's a bit out of order, but that's fine. So, skill line category. We're going to look at skill line category is for the categories used. Attributes, weapon skills, class skills, armor proficiencies, secondaries, languages, professions, or not displayed. This is the sorting index that is used by the client. So essentially all of these skills will be sorted in this order. So your attributes come first, your class skills come second, professions third, secondaries fourth, etc. That's the way that the client sorts them in the skill tab of your character pane. Other than that, these IDs are referenced for a few other things, but I'm not going to touch on that right now. I'm just going to go back. Average Junior says, yes, you can. I shared it in the Discord. Yeah, let me take a look here real quick. Are things like Hunter's Dead Zone and DBC, ask Brivs? DBCs, or are they hard-coded? Hunter's Dead Zone is entirely determined by, yes, DBCs, because the abilities have a minimum range. And as well, the server also has determinations for that within checks, but I'll get to that with spell range. We'll take a look, in fact. We can do that right now, just to answer your questions. We'll go to the spell range DBC, and you can see within spell range, range minimum would be hunter abilities basically have a range minimum of 10 yards. So you can see that the minimum exists for like auto shot. It would be what, 30 yards, so between 10 and 30 yards. If you look at a hunter's auto shot ability, the range index that's used would be 9. Oh, okay, yeah, that's the little pop-out button. I actually never even noticed that. Oh, good call on that. So yeah, Hunter's minimum range is set up in the DBC. If you wanted to change the Hunter's range, what you're better off doing, don't even change the spell DBC, because that would inevitably change everything that uses that. Just change the spell itself to use a different range index. For example, you could change the 9 to a 4, and then it would have no more dead zone. You'd be able to use auto shot from 0 yards. Intrepid Hermit asks, was the haste from aspect of the beast also applied to the pet, or just the hunter's melee? He's talking about the Wallcraft improved aspect of the beast. That is just for hunters, correct. Aspect of the beast is not an aura. I should say it's not like a party-wide or an area-wide aura. It's just a self-aura. Though that probably would be a good talent. The only issue is then, I mean, I could make it affect the pet, but the pet already has an attack speed increase, and haste. Haste has diminishing returns, essentially, so because they already have a 30%, there's really not much point to it. You would be able to squeeze out like an extra 6% haste off of it, even if it was just like a flat 20 or 30. So, not really a huge point. Beto asks, hey, well, I hope you're doing great. I want to ask you, will you release an official server soon? I mean, people start at level 1, etc. Let me answer him real quick. Just to say, I'm probably going to release a beta at the end of this year. My goal is to release a beta before the end of this year, obviously. Hopefully, sometime early winter. I'd like to release the beta at the end of this year, but in terms of a full launch, that's not until next year. The beta will be 1 to 60. No I-60s on the beta. It's going to be full progression 1 to 60. So, definitely look forward to that. The beta is definitely going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a very standard leveling process. The beta won't include war mode very likely, unless I really manage to get that done before then, but there's a lot of work required for war mode implementation. Now, I've got a million things on my plate right now, but the beta will obviously have Death's Trial. It'll have full 1 to 60 PvP server with, you know, all the bells and whistles. Basically everything besides war mode or any of the new dungeons and raids. We're going to move back up to the top here, and we're going to just keep going down through the list because there's a lot of DBCs that we'd like to cover. Most of them, like I said, they're pretty much just take a look at them and move on, but let's just continue going through here. We're going to go to the next one that we had left off from earlier, which is camera shakes. Camera shakes is a DBC that determines how the camera reacts for shakes, which you'll notice prominently in things like fighting landslide in Maradon. I think that's the most prominent one. Or any spells like Wallcraft, the earthquake ability has a camera shake. Basically, it causes players' cameras to shake around them. There's a shake type that's enumerated. You can find the listing here on the wiki. Camera shakes. DBC. Actually, there's no real information, mostly shaking cameras. So, you know, that's how a lot of DBCs are. They're pretty much guesswork, and you can just kind of figure them out. Camera shakes, sign, decayed sign, number type of camera shakes. So, this references the shake type. I can't recall if there's a DBC that references shake type. Let's see. Yeah, nothing. So, you're basically just guessing the type of shake, the direction, amplitude, frequency, duration, phase, coefficient. It's pretty self-explanatory. But yeah, this is used for referencing camera shakes. This will be referenced on spell visual effects, which we'll get to later. So just keep that in mind. Moving on to the next one, CFG categories. This is a config file. This might not load. Yeah, ID contains duplicate columns. We can load this with a different DBC editor, but it's not something you're ever really going to need to edit. CFG configs and categories. Take a look at config, see if that loads. So this is just used for the client's realm type, whether or not player killing is allowed, whether or not it's role-playing. If you really wanted to add a new realm type, you could, but this is used within the client's I'm pretty sure this is information that's hard-coded within the client. This is just a reference table, so it's not really something you can edit unless you have a modified client, which we're not going to cover, obviously. So, the CFG files, the config files, you don't really need to worry about. Character create cameras. This one can only be loaded in alpha because this is when it was created, was never updated. This is the character create cameras that are used for the M2 for character creation. Basically on the main menu, when you have a character selected for previewing, it's actually an M2 model that's loaded that your character's standing on top of, which is why, obviously, if you take a look at the Wallcraft Goblin or Ogre, they're just using the Orc one with like the fiery hill with the banners and the pikes sticking out, just because I haven't created a new M2 for them specifically, so just chose the one that, you know, was the most convenient. This determines the race that uses it, the sex that uses it, and the type of camera, and the camera height with the radius and the target. This is something that you only have to delve into really if you're working with custom classes. If you're that far into development, you're probably going to be able to figure it out yourself though. So, character create cameras. And there's basically no information on it to begin with. The camera height, the information could basically just be copied from another one. If you're making a character like, let's say we're putting in high elves, we would just copy basically data from the night elf one. It's essentially all the same. It's pretty self-explanatory though. Moving on to character facial hairstyles. Let me close some of these out. In fact. Character facial hairstyles just lists off the geosets that the character's facial hair uses. This is just more custom stuff. So if you're trying to customize a character's facial hair, you would have to define the geosets that are used for that hair loadout. This is facial hairs, so essentially there's going to be different IDs that can be used. You set up the variations, so one for race is human. You can see that human has 7 different variations for the male's facial hair. Obviously female doesn't have any facial hair for humans, so this just pertains to males. There's 7 different variations, and this is determining the geosets that get used. This would be like your beard, your mustache, your, you know, side stuff. You would have to really delve into model editing to figure out what geosets are referenced here. And the geoset groups, basically, are listed over in this section. So this is just for making custom facial hairs. Some of these DBCs, they're pretty high tier in terms of knowledge of what you're doing. So if you're already at this point, you probably have this already figured out. But yeah, so this references geosets used for those specific hairs and the geoset groups here. Kazier says on the Discord, just a bit of Hunter feedback from the PvP last night. Hunter felt good. Some of the balance spells, such as the specs having Scatter Shot, True Shot, felt a little bit overwhelming, and that the class feels like it has too many spells. I was struggling for Action Bar Room big time. I was liking the idea of Aspect of the Beast benefiting the pet as well, so it's more dedicated to a Beastmaster and or melee build. Otherwise felt solid, good work. The heals for the pet talent was great. I do like the idea of Aspect of the Beast affecting your pet. The problem, though, really is just diminishing returns on haste. The pet already having a talent for attack speed increase. Basically, the way that they would stack together is very marginal. I could make it affect it, and then your pet would have a faster attack speed overall, but then that diminishes the other talent, so that's something that I probably just simply wouldn't consider. It's a nice concept, but in practice it just doesn't really work out. Because the 30 and the 30, 30 from the aspect and 30 from the talent proc, when your pet crits, they wouldn't stack to 60. They would stack to like 37, basically, because of the diminishing returns on them. It sucks, but that's just, you know, it's just how it works with the haste stacking. It's subject to diminishing returns. As for having additional spells, it does take a little bit to get used to basically having Scatter Shot and Wyvern Sting additionally. But, yeah, frankly, I don't feel like the class has too many buttons to push when you compare it to something like a Shaman, where they have like 26 totems in default vanilla. So it might seem a little overwhelming at first, but a little bit of practice, you'll kind of get used to the meta of having those spells, simply because those spells typically aren't taken or they're not accessible within standard PvP builds. If you're playing like a BM Marksman Hunter, you might have Scatter Shot, maybe, but you definitely wouldn't have Wyvern Sting traditionally in vanilla, so just having like the extra buttons might be taking a little bit getting used to. It's only like 2 or 3 extra abilities, though, that you wouldn't normally have. So, yeah, it might seem overwhelming a little bit at first to have new stuff to play, especially because if you've been playing the game for 18 years, you know, you're just not really used to it. But I would say for people that are familiar or played or spent a lot of time in TBC or Wrath of the Lich King, it definitely doesn't feel like too much, just because you then have further abilities or more abilities in those expansions to begin with. So, if you're used to like a TBC Hunter, you're probably a little bit more used to the keybind layout. The big problem is, though, people get so used to their vanilla keybind layouts that it does seem a little bit confusing at first. Practice makes perfect, though, in that regard. If there is any feedback, though, for an ability that's not working correctly or something like that, definitely let me know. Or if you do have any opinions on that, stuff like that, definitely let me know. I have thought about, in fact, I will say this, I have thought about making Scatter Shot a talent once more and making Aim Shot baseline, so that you're not really obligated to go into Marksman for every spec that you play just to be efficient. And probably I will do that, so I probably will make Aim Shot baseline with Scatter Shot being a Marksman talent. There's still a little bit of work I want to do on Marksman Hunter in particular. I feel like some of their end talents, Take Aim is a really strong talent. It's really good for PvP, and it increases your DPS and rating. But I don't like the like tier 5 or tier 6 talents in that tree. They just don't do enough. 5% extra range damage on the tier 6 being the only talent is kind of lame. So that's definitely going to have a little bit more love added to it. Recently, I increased Scorpion Sting's potential in PvP. Scorpion Sting's talent reduces stamina. It now reduces it by 100% with max points based on the amount of strength drain from Scorpion Sting, so it's like 68 at max level. And it now affects raid bosses, so using Scorpion Sting is actually very powerful, and people haven't discovered that yet. If you use a Scorpion Sting on somebody, you're going to instantly remove like 1.2k health from their health bar. That's really significant. And obviously it's not damage, it's just removing it, but that's definitely a huge deal. Josh H says, hello, first time looking at Wallcraft live for the first time. Is there a release date set yet? The server is currently in open alpha. It's available 24/7 for playtesting. There's I-60 for you to test all the content, all the weapons and items and stuff. And there's also additionally hardcore mode, Death's Trial, where you're automatically sent to your starting zone at level 1, completely naked with the Death's Trial debuff active. In Death's Trial, if you die, it's not permadeath though. If you die in Death's Trial, all of your equipped and worn items and carried items in your bag are lost permanently. So it's very fun meta of crafting and creating and storing, stashing extra gear sets and making sure that you don't die because you lose all your carried stuff, obviously. Obviously there's a few exceptions: mounts, bags, keys, quest items, indestructible items like shaman totems and thieves tools and stuff like that. Lord Rin, if you haven't played Marksman, definitely go try Take Aim. You'll definitely like it. It's like first-person shooter mode. It's like friggin' an actual first-person shooter in WoW. It's really fun. But yeah, I do plan on launching the beta later this year. Before the end of this year, the beta will be launched, and the full server comes next year. So there's still a lot of work to do. Moving on to the next DBC here. We're gonna talk about one more, and then we're gonna go have another quick break. I got water right here real quick. Let me sip that. Character base info DBC. This is essentially a DBC that just defines what race can be what class. So, very interesting DBC. You take a look through it, you'll see actually a few things that might pique your interest. Really, the big one here and the only one, row 17, is race 3, class ID 8. Now, this is interesting here. This is interesting because this is the Dwarf Mage. It exists in the vanilla client. This is not changed. This is the Dwarf Mage enumeration. Row 17 for race 3, which is Dwarf, and class 8, which is Mage. Dwarf Mage does exist in vanilla. The issue is that it was playable in alpha. Blizzard decided to remove it, and instead of just removing the row from this DBC, they added a really shitty hack fix to the client itself, which prevents the selection screen from displaying Dwarf Mage. So, in fact, if I were to change this to the number for a Shaman, a Dwarf Shaman would appear as a selectable character on the selection screen. I could even do that right now, in fact. Here, let's see. I can't remember what a Shaman. We can change it to, we'll do 11 for Druid. If I were to change this to 11 for Druid and load this into the client, I would be able to select a Dwarf Druid in the client. It's very interesting. The Mage, though, the Dwarf Mage combination is hard-coded to not be available on the client, which is really lame because it makes it very difficult to add Dwarf Mage. I did think of a few ways of adding it. I had Dwarf Mage playable, essentially. I have to delete something. I don't want to delete that. I want to delete the Shaman. So if I choose Dwarf, you can see Druid. Like, it doesn't have the loadout for the gear because I don't have it assigned in the rest of the DBC files, but yeah, like, it's that easy, really. There's a few other things that have to be edited to actually make it playable. In fact, if I were to try to load in, it's going to say incorrect. Yeah, error creating character. It's incorrect combination. But yeah, like, that's the problem, though, is that the Dwarf Mage combination is hard-coded to not be available on the client for vanilla. A few ways that I thought of being able to easily implement Dwarf Mage while using the default client is either A, creating a brand new class called Dwarf Mage as the class, and just putting all of the mage information into the client strings, which I did previously. It was playable for like a week, but there was a lot of work that would need to be done to make it fully correct, and there was an issue with class flag enumerations. Basically, items that are specifically restricted to some classes, like the Eye of the Beast trinket. It's, you know, Priest, Mage, Warlock, Shaman, Druid. Well, if I added Dwarf Mage as a class, then Mage would be listed twice on that trinket. It would say Mage, comma, Mage, because the client's showing two different Mage classes, essentially. So, that's kind of a jank fix. It would work, and it would be less work than the other solution. The other solution is by swapping the Warlock and the Mage classes entirely within the client data. I would have to go through basically everything in the game, all of the skills, all of the items, all of the talents, etc., and swap them around to make that available. That's a lot of work, but it would be a lot cleaner. It would be a lot cleaner, and the big thing about Wallcraft, and Wallcraft looks good and feels good, is because I don't take shortcuts and do janky little things to make it work. If it doesn't look right, if it doesn't look like it belongs in vanilla, it doesn't exist in Wallcraft. So that would be the right solution. The third solution, and the solution that is basically creating a modified client patch. If I were to do that, I could basically override the hard coding with a client modification, but that means then players would need to use a modified client. And a big facet of the Wallcraft project is that it uses the default 1.12.1 client plus the custom patch. So whatever default client that you use to play all your other servers can be used to play on Wallcraft. I very likely, years down the road, maybe like 2 or 3 years down the road, might move towards a modified client, but I'm really enjoying pushing the default vanilla client to its, limits. So I talked to Britannia, though. He says, it's definitely a good idea to move forward with a modified client, because then I could add all of the things. I could add vanilla fixes, I could add NAM power, I could add basically all the client fixes that exist outside the client. I could add those directly into my own client, and they would just be default part of the client, which would make the game perform better. But, that's a consideration that's down the road. Nothing in the near future, certainly not by launch, will I be using a modified client. The game will launch with a default 1.12 client. But yeah, this is just the, like I said, race and class combinations. Very easy to figure out. Monkey says, Melee Hunter is really cool, but I'll always be a fan of the kiting playstyle. That's the thing, Survival Hunter on Wallcraft is the ultimate kiter. You literally are able to abuse the dead zone range to your advantage, because you can use throwing weapons between 8 to 30 yards instead of typical 10 to 30 yards for bows and crossbows and stuff. So you're able to use those 8 to 10 or 8 to 30 yards, and with the Primal Hunter talent, you're able to melee at 10-yard range. So you have a 2-yard range where you can hit the enemy with both throwing and melee, and they cannot hit you with anything. It's very, very... It's probably the biggest kiter in the game. In fact, I'm going to type that out and chat to him. Britannia says, FYI, there's a command to disable area triggers server side. Cheat, ignore triggers. Oh, okay. Oh, much appreciated for that information, man. I actually thought cheat, ignore triggers was for spell trigger casts. I thought that was for ignoring triggers for spells. That's actually really interesting that that's for area triggers. Oh, much appreciated. That's actually going to be very helpful. Yuri says, what if you have the client send the server a new class ID? When the class ID is sent to the server creates the ID that correlates to Mage instead of the custom class. Yes, I have thought of that. The only issue, though, is that that's another jank fix. Essentially... actually, that might work, in fact. That actually is a really good idea. That might work. If I were to just create a new class within the client, the Dwarf Mage class, and then it would obviously have all the information in the client for the mage class, so you'd see the mage icon, click on it, it would say mage, etc. But then when the class is created, it just creates the dwarf mage. That's actually smart. Wow, that would actually work, in fact. And that would save me all the effort. That's actually brilliant. Wow. Yeah, very, very smart thinking there. I'll have to look into that. I would just, yeah, basically when you create the character, the server creates an actual mage instead of a dwarf mage. It just shows the dwarf mage class. The only issue then, though, is that you are still enumerating a new class entirely, and that breaks all the items. Yeah, that's really the only issue. Because then there's an additional class, I'd have to go through all of the spell and item flags still. Yeah, that would work, but at the same time, it's still actually a lot of work, because then that encounters the same problem. And that's actually why I've removed the other classes from the client for the time being, just because all the items were showing stuff. Basically, like, if an item has the class enumerations for stuff, I'm trying to think if that would even matter, though. Just for skills, maybe. Not for items, since items are sent by the server and stored in the cache, and the server wouldn't have any enumerations. No, because the server still does pull from the character classes, DBC, which we're going to get to in a second. That would probably be the least amount of work, in fact. And that's probably the right way to go, instead of swapping Mage and Warlock. I'll have to look into that, Yuri. That's definitely smart. That probably would be the least amount of work. It would still definitely take a few changes, though. Let me look through YouTube chat. Misty says, the server won't allow you to create the druid, though, correct? Yes, that's correct. I could I could set it up to where you could actually play a dwarf druid, but obviously I don't have any plans on doing that. It won't let me create it, though, just simply because I have the, I don't have any of the other data filled out. And I want to make sure that I actually change that back correctly. 3.8. Oops. Wrong one. Character base info. Okay. I gotta reload this back into the client too, before I forget. Skill liability as well. Alright, so moving on to the next ones. Let's see. Valknon says, Femdwarf? Yes, Femdwarf. Brev says, maybe open source loader with hot patching would be acceptable and in line with your openness philosophy. Yeah, that's exactly what Britannia suggested as well. It says, open source loader with hot patching, one that players could compile themselves or just use the standalone. But that's definitely in line with my philosophy, and I'd be willing to accept that, simply because it's open source. Then you can tell exactly what's happening, so you wouldn't have to worry about anything. Briv says, also pre-hooking packet after character creation and making Dwarf Mage into Mage won't be feasible. Yes, that would be feasible. That's definitely a consideration, as we just discussed. Avid Jr. says, how about making only survival hunters being able to shoot in melee range? No, because survival hunters, I could make them only shoot in melee range, but I want them to be throwing and spear, basically a tomahawk spear type of archetype. Very Rexar style gameplay, where they have, you know, additional range from using a pole arm. They're taking advantage of the pole arm, and they're using throwing abilities. Simply because throwing is severely it's underutilized, and I wanted to fulfill the Rexar archetype for a survival hunter. Briv says, I mean storing in DB as normal mage. If I understood correctly, it's only creator UI that is hard-coded. Yeah, it would be stored in database as normal mage, but the problem is that the client does reference a lot of the stuff from character classes. So if I enumerated a new class, I would still have to do a lot of corrections. That definitely would be a good way to go about it, though. And in terms of the modified client with the open source patcher, that's definitely, if I were to go down that route, that's how I would do it. That's just, it's a lot of work that I don't simply have the time for right now, nor I won't say I don't have the interest, but I'm very much enjoying just working with the default client plus the custom patch. So it's something later on down the road, though, once I basically run out of stuff to do besides just adding new dungeons and stuff. That's probably what I'll be working on. Probably like a year or two. Or I should say another 2 or 3 years. Ian Field asks, is your plan to have Dwarf Mage? Yes, I will have Dwarf Mage. I can't guarantee if it's going to be in by the beta. It should be in by the launch, though. I can pretty much assure that. I had Dwarf Mage playable for like a week for people, so it's already been added to the server. It's just not... It's got a lot of work to make everything totally smooth. Misty asks, will we ever cover extra code being sent to the client through, say, Eluna or through Modified Warden? Many servers use it for UI additions. Say Eluna through Modified Warden. Probably not. Not anytime soon, I'll say. A lot of the stuff, I would rather just have it directly without any type of add-ons or additions. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of add-ons. I don't use any add-ons myself, really. I play with, like, as bare bones default as possible. For, let's say, something like Threat, I would rather do Threat using a modification to the core, and, if possible, the client, to essentially display Threat. So, something like that, than really worrying about add-ons. Add-ons aren't my field of expertise, and, like I said, I'm not a huge fan of add-ons myself. Add-ons are nice, but I feel like they either trivialize the game or they create less enjoyable gameplay because you're more focused on ricing out your setup than actually playing the game. I cannot tell you how many times I've been in the middle of a dungeon and somebody says, oh, hold on, I need 20 minutes. My PF UI just completely shit the bed. It's like, alright, like, you can't just play with the default UI. That's what kills me. I used to be into creating all the crazy action bars and stuff like that, using all the different, bongos and whatnot, but over time, and after having literally spent the last 3 years making 40 characters a day, I realized default UI is the way to go. So, I turned off all my add-ons and never turned it back on. Maybe someday, but no guarantees. Moving on to the next database, we're just going to talk about hair geosets, and we're going to take another quick break. I want to smoke a cig and get a drink, and we'll go on for about another hour here. Character hair geosets is basically the exact same thing as the facial hair. It's got less geosets to reference. The race, the sex, the variations. So for human, male has 11 different hair variations. The geoset ID is referenced here, and it depends whether or not you're going to show the scalp for the character. So you can see the wall look right here, ID 21, human, male, bald, with the scalp. that's the good wall right there. But yeah, this is variations for different races' hair. This just references essentially geoset IDs, the big one that you're going to want to be talking about. But pretty self-explanatory. You can see I have enumerations for additional races, though, within the Wallcraft client. 9 being Goblin. Goblin is actually part of the default client, in fact. So 9 is Goblin, 10 is High Elf, 11 Ogre, 12 Furbolg, 13 is Gnoll, Murloc, Naga, Scourge. So all the extra races for their variations. Ian Field asks, interesting, so what do you have in mind for race class combos that you are interested in having? Nothing outside of really the original. If you're asking whether or not there's going to be like a Dwarf Shaman, no. There'll never be an Undead Hunter, there's never going to be an Undead Paladin. The only things that I will guarantee for race class combos, aside from any of the new races, which are, again, all third faction, they're not Alliance nor Horde. Goblin is Goblin, Ogre is Ogre, Murloc is Murloc, they're neither Alliance nor Horde. Dwarf Mage would be the only one. That's because Dwarf Mage is obviously a thing that was in alpha and was just scrapped before vanilla was released. And I would say possibly Human Hunter, but that's debatable. Blizzard did plan on doing Human Hunter, which is why Stormwind has a shit ton of Hunter stuff. But it was never actually in the beta, as far as I'm aware, at any point. It was just early game concept that they would have intended, and it would at least make thematic sense, but frankly, I wouldn't bother. Like, what's the point, really? I don't see the point. Dwarf Mage, at least, is part of Alpha, so it's part of WoW at one point. It was scrapped for Vanilla. Maybe I would do Dwarf Mage. Dwarf Mage, I would say, yes, I'm going to do, but nothing else, really. I just don't see the intrinsic value. And frankly, a lot of people absolutely hate the idea of an undead paladin or a dwarf shaman running around. That's not vanilla. There's never going to be shamans on Alliance, and there's never going to be paladins on Horde. There will be shamans and paladins on the third factions, which are neither Alliance nor Horde, but that is entirely different gameplay, and obviously it's not going to be something that affects the meta for Horde or Alliance. And third factions aren't raiding factions, they're pretty much PvP-centric factions with some custom quest lore and stuff like that. As an example, the Ogre. If you were to play an Ogre on Wallcraft, Ogres are playable currently. If you were to zone into Dire Maul as an Ogre, all of the Ogres are friendly. If you were to go to Tanarus and walk to the Ogre encampments, or the Stone Maul ruins, anything like that, all the Ogres, they're friendly to you because you're an Ogre. You can even talk to the NPCs that you normally couldn't talk to if they have any dialogue set up, which I think is only really one NPC by default. But, like, their quest, as an Ogre player, your objective is to unite the Ogre clans in Azeroth for supremacy. And you're hostile to both Alliance and Horde. As a Goblin, you are neutral to both Alliance and Horde. And perhaps Goblin might be able to group with them, but that's not really intended gameplay or even planned. You won't be able to run Battlegrounds as any of the new races. Raiding, probably not either. You're not really able to group with them. The only exception may be Goblin, just because Goblin's end goal is to just get wealth and extract wealth from both Alliance and Horde. You're part of the, the Steam Weedle cartel. You can take advantage of Alliance and Horde cities as a Goblin. Since you're neutral, you can go into Orgrimmar and use the auction house. You can go into Stormwind and use the auction house. So Goblin players are the ultimate merchants of Azeroth. They can go into both capitals and use both auction houses, and essentially play the economy. If you're a Goblin player, your end game is to play the market and become the richest person in the game. So, that's definitely a different gameplay style. Looking through the VMaNGOS classroom chat. Character create M2 files when selecting character. Yeah, that's the that's the Horde one there. Ever Jr. says in the chat there. Yeah, character create M2s are basically the character create cameras that are used for the M2 screens on character selection loadout. Like I said, though, I just didn't make any new M2s for the new races, so I'm just using the default Orc one. Let's see. Yeah, we'll talk about the next one real fast because I know this is going to be a fast one as well. Character hair textures. Character hair textures is pretty self-explanatory. It just references a texture string within the client. Race, sex. Field 3 I'm actually not aware of. Let's take a look at that real quick. Hair textures. Character hair textures, I can't see any sense in this one, only that there are files like hair 01 blip for humans, and they have 2 in the 6th column. Well, this file existed in the alpha, it was not used by the client. So this one might not even really be referenced. It probably is in some capacity, but obviously the fields don't even have descriptions, so I would say that this is probably not something you're ever really going to be using. I didn't add any hair textures for the new races because their hair is all hard-baked into the character models. This isn't the variations either, this is just the textures. Probably references some sort of texture that's used, a BLP file, but there's no descriptions on any of these fields, and it doesn't look like anybody else has really figured this one out, so. Anywho, we're gonna take a break here, and we're going to go on for about another hour and just continue on for the DBCs. Next month's lesson's probably going to be continuing on with this as well. just because there's a lot of DBCs to cover. We want to go over all of them just so they're on record. People can reference this in the future. Either way, we're going to take a 5-minute break here and be back. So stay tuned. And we are back. Always a pleasure. Let's take a look at the chat, see what's been going on. Alright, let's dip right back into it. And go on for about another 45 minutes here and just talk about a few more of the DBCs. So where we left off, character sections. Character sections is very important. This denotes the different variations for body types that your character can have. This falls in line with the different variations that we had discussed in the previous ones. So we'll take a look here. You can see the race, the sex, the section type. Section type being different types of skins that exist on a character. So for section type 0, it would reference the body. In fact, we're going to pull up the wiki here. So these are the different section types. Skin being 0, face 1, facial hair 2, etc. The client for vanilla only uses the first 4. All the rest are post-vanilla, so no HD skins or textures or anything like that. The variations, though, you'll see have different color indexes. This is for your skin color, so when you choose skin color, it uses the different skin files listed in here. You can actually see that there's, for the variation index, for the color skin, has a few additional components for some of them. These were added later, you can tell, added much later. And it goes down through all of the different races, all of the different sexes that you can play as. Some of them don't have any type of variations listed out within the VLPs. That's because the section types that you'll see here for 3 is like hair. It doesn't reference any type of texture. This is the character's hair texture reference from the previous one that we looked at. So as we're trying to figure out character hair textures, it's definitely referenced. It's definitely necessary, I would say. I actually can't confirm that, but I'll just say it's necessary, because you don't see any of the hair textures listed in this file. But different facial features and whatnot, you go down all the way through, and you can see even the new ones that I had enumerated. For goblins, obviously there's the goblin exists already within the client. You can see the new ones that I had added, or that exists already. Ogre skin black, ogre skin red. These are referenced by the variations, and this is referenced by sex, essentially, because I could list out different ones, but I just changed ogre since there's no ogre females, obviously. I just used 2 different ones. The ogre skin black, essentially. So furbog skin. In fact, furbog skin had some issues, so I couldn't really present them for any of the previews. Still looking into that. The furbog skins have an alpha transparency issue, so been looking into that. But yeah, pretty self-explanatory. Just reference the section type and the variations that you can use, and the color index is used. Color index is used for the character selection screen. So if you were to do a modified client that has different races selectable on the character section screen, it would use these different indexes. Bounty asks, do you have backups of these wiki posts in case they shut down in some years? I have considered running a crawler, running HT track on the website just to make sure that I have copies, but I know people like Alistair and Skarn probably have full backups of all this stuff, so if it ever did for some reason go down, they would probably post them. If not, then, well, I would just be shit out of luck myself. So it's definitely something to consider, but it's not my general priority right now to back up different websites. Moving on to the next DBC. Character start outfit denotes the starting equipment that your character has on character selection screen. Your character start outfit really only pertains to the character selection screen. Once the character is made, the server then hosts the information for your character's loaded outfit. In fact, you can actually see a minor issue I've been looking into. I haven't really figured it out yet, but we'll take a look at it real quick here. I can show you. If we were to take a look at the rogue, in Warcraft, rogues start with dual-wielded daggers, and you have the dual-wield skill learned automatically. So your character selection screen outfit has the 2 daggers, and we make the rogue, and suddenly you will have 1 dagger. That's because the server hasn't parsed that information yet, but when we load into the game, you'll see that they do in fact have 2 daggers. So you start out with the 2 daggers in-game, and then if we were to go back to the main menu, we suddenly have 2 daggers again. So I think that that's just a discrepancy with the server, because obviously all the information is set up correctly in the databases and in the DBCs. I just don't know why it transitions to the single dagger. It's probably just like a... It's probably referenced somewhere else that I'm missing, but I haven't figured that out yet. So this is for your character selection screen loadout outfits. You can have them equip any item for these item slots. The item slots are referenced with the item IDs, which we can look up on the wiki for character start outfits. You can see the item displays. Actually ignored by the client. Item display info, both only set if item X is set to. So, it doesn't really tell you the slots. Information about the items the characters get when they enter the world the first time. The server seems to have the same database since there are non-viewable items listed to bind stones, food, etc. These fields do not have the standard 4 byte blocks. Race, class, gender, and outfit ID are bytes. So these are all bytes. The display info might actually just need to be updated for that. In fact, because these are just the item IDs. So, yeah, that's probably what I'm missing is the display info listed here. In fact, take a look here. Human rogue. What was rogue again? Class 4. So they should have a dual-wield dagger. And that actually probably needs to be listed right here. So let's take a look here. Worn dagger. 2092. And they have 12092 listed. Item ID of 27. Okay, so yeah, this is their offhand. So they do have 2 daggers listed 2092. And the item display info. Is 6442. So it should be referenced twice, which it is. And inventory type ID is referenced, so yeah, bit of a mystery. In fact, is it referenced correctly? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So yeah, that is listed correctly. So, bit of a mystery as to why it changes between those 2 scenes, but you don't really notice it, so if anybody knows that information. Yeah, it could be cache, but I doubt it. I'm not really sure. If somebody does figure that out, don't hesitate to let me know. JSDND asks, hey, Mr. Wall, a question. If you launch your server, it will be progressed through expansions or just stay vanilla and upgrade it? Yes, it's just a vanilla server. I don't plan on ever moving towards TBC or Wrath of the Lich King. Wallcraft aims to refurbish all the unfinished content and optimize the game for high-octane gameplay. Strictly vanilla, though. Monkey says, I haven't tried it yet since I can't log in, but I assume they can't kite range classes. Logging. Either way, character start outfit is pretty self-explanatory in that regard. Just make sure that you have the item ID and the display info listed correctly for the both slots. And make sure you list the item slot ID correctly. Character variations is the next one we're going to be looking at. Yeah, this needs to be loaded with alpha. Character variations will load the definitions for alpha. And this one I haven't really figured out myself. Let's take a look at the wiki though. Maybe it'll shed a little bit more light on that. But last I recall, it doesn't say anything on here. Yeah, they seem to be unknown. I'm guessing 512 obviously is a flag. Texture hold layer exists only for specific races, which would be race 6 Tauren and race 8 Troll. I'm guessing that this is probably some sort of loincloth type thing. And in fact, I could probably even change it for Ogre and see if it does anything special. Maybe this will fix the geosets for the legs. I don't know. I'm guessing that this is a loincloth enumeration. So, we'll see if that does anything for our ogres. But it seems to be removing a layer of texture. I'm not really sure what that's all about, though. And nor does anybody else seem to have info. If you have any info on these that we don't really know, feel free to post it, and we'll get that posted onto the wiki. I'll edit the wiki for it. Chat channels is the different various default chat channels. If we wanted to add default chat channels, we could essentially describe them within the client. Some clients will do this. Some servers will do this essentially if they have multilingual players and they're using a custom patch. They can you can add, like, you know, the world chat itself. You can add it as a default chat. Monkey says, it gives me the typical invalid account credentials error when logging into Wallcraft, but logging into the website works. Something to note is that the Wallcraft website doesn't actually validate any login information. You can enter total gibberish into the login boxes. It's just a deprecated function that I use to track users who are downloading my patch. Essentially just track by IP in case somebody's abusing anything. But yeah, the login for the website is deprecated. It doesn't do anything. The only thing that really does anything on the website is the registration itself. If you're having issues logging into the game server, and I noticed this for specific players, they seem to enter a different password into the website. and I can see it on the database that it's a different hash than they're trying to log in with, just make a new account. Like, it's an I-60 server. If you register an account on the website, you suddenly can't log into the game. It's not like it's something that changes over time. It's always, oh, I registered, and then I couldn't log in with my newly registered account. Just make another one. It's an I-60 server, and it's not something that's on my back end. You're using a different password, basically. He says he's tried to make multiple accounts. It doesn't work. The WoW client only accepts alphanumeric, so... It can only accept alphanumeric characters, and it must be between 4 to 12 or 16 characters long. So if you're having an issue, just try the test account. But this seems to only affect people who are using like foreign characters in their password. It's not going to work. Alphanumeric only 4 to 12 characters long, I would say. Best bet. But this is a very rare occurrence, usually with yeah, okay, so that's the problem. He's using foreign characters. Alphanumeric Latin characters only. Moving on to the next DBC. Chat profanity contains a list of all of the swear words that are censored by the game's filters. You can see it's got a lot of Chinese, a lot of Korean. And you'll notice all these IDs. The ID isn't really relevant. The brackets and the backslashes, those essentially just censor anything that is containing that word. So it doesn't have to be directly that word. It just contains that word, and it'll be censored. You can see at the very end is obviously stuff added by Blizzard at the end, so post-fact, and these are gold-selling websites. So Blizzard said, alright, well, we're just going to censor them in the chat profanity because they're extremely prevalent. So yeah, like WoW Supplier, My Super Sales, a lot of Chinese gold-selling websites got added after the fact. Moving on to the next one. Character classes. Now, character classes and character races, these are the enumerations for the different classes. Wallcraft had the Death Knight and the Technician listed. That's something that people don't really realize, is that Death Knight was, in fact, probably going to be added early, but they just never were able to complete it, so obviously it didn't get added until Wrath of the Lich King. Death Knight in Wrath of the Lich King has an ID of 6. If you'll notice, 6 is missing from the vanilla enumerations. It skips from 5 to 7. They very were likely going to have Death Knights as a class, but again, just didn't have time to add them. So you have the different classes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 11. So 6 and 10 are skipped. 6 and 10 were what was set up for Death Knights and Technicians in Wallcraft, but due to the item class mask issues, showing all of the classes essentially on items instead of not showing anything, that would have had to have been corrected manually for basically everything. So I stripped them from the database just for the time being, so the client isn't looking dirty. Either way. Field 1 indicates whether or not the class is playable. If the class is, we're actually going to pull this up here. Character classes. Let's take a look at the structure. Unknown, it says Hunter, Shaman, and Rogue got 1. Death Knight has 9. Others seem to be 0, or the field was removed in Cataclysm. It's actually referencing Field 2. Field 1 doesn't seem to be referenced on that. This is for the Wrath client, so they don't have any enumerations for the vanilla. Player class just denotes whether or not it's playable by players, though, so I can absolutely guarantee field 1. If there's a 1, it means it's playable. If it's any other number, it means it's not selectable on the character selection screen. Field 2 means Hunter and Rogue. Not really sure why Hunter and Rogue specifically have these, as opposed to something else. So, Hunter, Shaman, and Rogue, but Shaman doesn't have it in vanilla, it's just Hunter and Rogue. So, don't really know what that is, but it must mean something, I guess. Power type indicates what type of power that class uses. Warrior obviously uses Rage, 0. So, 1 is Rage, 0 is Mana, 3 is Energy. 2 would be Focus, but no classes actually had Focus, only pets. Hunters were originally probably supposed to have Focus, but they ended up getting Mana because Blizzard couldn't figure out the Focus system in time. So, that's why vanilla Hunters have Mana. Now, I had considered switching Hunters to a Focus system, but decided against it, just because I didn't feel like reworking every Hunter ability for something that's not really vanilla. Just names here. The pet types and the tokens are used in client strings. Warlock is the only one that doesn't have just a pet listing. They have Demon. That's because their pet types are demons. They're a pet class with demon pets. File name is referenced within the client strings. So it's all caps here, and this is just what references within the client strings. So when I had made the Dwarf Mage, the name was Dwarf Mage, but the client file names all reference Mage, and that's how I kind of worked that magic for that. Field just denotes what order they're listed in. Basically, class 1 and 2 are like healing potions and consumables. For some reason, they're also listed as part of the class. There's actually the enumeration in VMaNGOS and shared defines. It's in somewhere. I can't remember. Maybe class flag. No. Yeah, there's an enumeration, though, in the core that lists off, like, potions and consumables are actually 1 and 2. I think it's potions and elixirs are 1 and 2 for some reason. So Mage starts at 3, and then it just goes down 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So, typically you'll see the 11th listed as Druid. That's because it references the ID instead of these fields. I think this is just client fields. Valknut says he doesn't see Susan Express in the character profanity. So I don't think Susan Express got popular until late TBC or Wrath. That's when they became major, and Susan Express was notorious for using teleport hacks to send level 1 characters in front of cities and then killing them so that their corpses would align into the website name. And you would go into Stormwind or Orgrimmar, and there would always be like 50 floating dead level 1s spelling out Susan Express. It was the funniest. It was the funniest thing. People would light fires under the bodies and shit. It was just really funny. The last field is referencing yeah, what is this? Spell class set? No. That's the next one. Flags. Sword of flags. Okay, so use loincloth. The last field just references a flag for this. This is binary. So, only 1 is used, and this denotes whether or not the flag or the class should use a loincloth. Paladin, Shaman, and Druid, apparently. Which is weird, Paladin, not Hunter. Huh. Anywho. Moving on to the next one. Okay, Monkey said, yeah, he was using an invalid character for registering his account, so I'm going to ask him what character he was using, and I can filter it on the registration so people don't have that problem. I thought I had included everything, but probably not, like Chinese characters or something like that. I think he's Spanish, so it's probably like upside down question mark or whatever that is. Next, DBC, character races. This denotes all of the individual races. In default vanilla, there are 9. All the extra ones after that are Warcraft new races. So 9 would be Goblin. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You can see the listing right here for races: human, orc, dwarf, night elf, tauren, or undead, tauren, gnome, troll, goblin. Goblin is listed as a playable race within the default vanilla DBCs. It has a flag in the flag field for not being playable, not being selectable. So exploration sound. Actually, we're going to go back. We're going to go look at the flags here. Let me pull this up. Flags here. So yeah, Goblin in the default vanilla client, it exists as a character race, but it has the 1 flag, so it's not playable. And it's very easy to make Goblins work in the vanilla client. You just have to essentially remove this flag and assign some models. The model assigned in the client actually isn't correct, so you just have to assign the ones listed here. So yeah, these different flags exist. Most of them are pretty standard. They're pretty much the same. Some have bare feet flags, like Troll and I believe Tauren have bare feet flags. So, yeah, let's see which one is this. Yeah, Tauren and Troll have no shoes displayed, so the lower half of the geo set for boots doesn't get displayed. The faction IDs are for the specific factions enumerated within the faction template. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the last 2 here that you'd see, 115 and 16, were added post-fact. And that is the gnome and the troll were actually added after the fact, later in the development cycle. Exploration sounds is just the sound that plays when you discover an area. Each class is supposed to have a specific exploration sound, but I think they're actually all the same. They might vary a little bit, but I've never really paid attention to that. Display info references the creature display info DBC, which we'll get to in a moment here. Actually, we're probably not going to have time for that today, but this references the display ID used for the class, race, I'm sorry. So we could pull this up, though, real quick, just to take a look. Creature display info. And we'll see 49. And something you'll notice is they often reference the same model ID. Not always, but for the default races, you'll see it references the same model ID. It has no texture variations, though. And that's because if we were to look at model 49, which is what the listing is for display ID 49, if we take a look at creature model data, DBC, we can see that 49 is listed as not a creature, where most of them are listed as creatures. This is character, human, human male. Now, the ones that are listed in default vanilla as characters are just the playable character races. You can see some of the custom ones that I've added, the ogre and stuff like that. Ogre and furbug, essentially, and null. Character models, the MDX or M2, basically the same thing, MDX being an older version of M2. These specifically have special flags to assign the texture variations from the other table, which is why they don't have any texture variations listed in the display info. Typically, you would have a texture variation, and that texture is baked onto the model, whereas the playable races don't. So, if I were to go in-game on an orc and mod morph into 49, I would look all sorts of screwed up. Basically, I would be an orc with or I would be a human with orc skin, because the skin would be left over. I'll go on this troll here and I'll show you real quick. So if I were to mod morph 49, I will take on a human form, but the troll skin remains because the skin isn't assigned. So you'll see I'll look all fucked up. Yeah, I'm missing my lower facial features, and I'm a very jacked ladyboy troll human dude. I don't know. I don't even know what you'd call this. Abomination. But yeah, that's because the character models have special flags to not load the textures. So it just retains the previous texture when you morph into it. Nyler says, damn, I'm late. Yeah, you're a little late, buddy. You can always just rewatch the video, though. It's always available on YouTube here. Them says, off, same, I'm late. Ooh. Yeah, I was hoping to see you here, Thems. We are wrapping up in about 15 minutes here, so this is the very tail end of it, but it was definitely a good stream, a lot of info here, so feel free to rewatch everything. Let's take a look here. Okay, so back to character races. So yeah, just the display info references the creature display info. The client prefix is what is used for item display info. So special attachments like helmets, weapons, shoulders. Helmets, weapons, and shoulders are attachments. They're not baked into the character's skin. Like, if you actually look in vanilla, the chest plate armor is just retexturing your character's chest with the armor. It's not actually attaching armor to you, but shoulders, helmets, and weapons are attached at certain points. So every item essentially has a copy for each race, and it uses a specific set of attachment points for that display info. So the client prefix is what determines that for the item display info. And in fact, if you'll take a look, Goblin has its own attachment points. That's because Mr. Kazgrim was very, very kind enough to provide Wallcraft with all of the ported Goblin helmets to have the proper attachment point set up. And the Ogre uses the Orc attachment points because they're very similar, so they work. I could take the client prefix for human, though, and I could, for example, change it to Tauren, and it would look all fucked up, but my helmet would be Tauren on the human. So, like, especially like Goblin Rocket Helmet, because Taurens wear it upside down in a really goofy way. I could take the Torrent client prefix, and if I put it on the human, the helmet would be really messed up looking. It would be like upside down and sticking on my face. So it's pretty funny to see. But yeah, this is referencing the item display info. Speed is determined here in the character races DBC. That's because certain races have different model sizes, so their speed is modified in this. You could change the speed, though, and basically they would, I don't know if they run faster or if it's just animation. I've actually never explored changing any of these. And these probably will require some different things, but I think it's just the speed at which they play their movement animation. Base language is the base language that is known. 7 being common and 1 being Orcish. 0 is a universal language, so if the character race has 0 set, it means that they just speak basically like a GM level language that can communicate with everybody else. For NPCs that are speaking, let's say if I were to take my Goblin, because his base language is 0, if I were to take my Goblin into Stormwind, I could talk to the vendors, but they would all be speaking common in the text that I see on the, like the dialogue boxes and stuff. So I wouldn't actually be able to see what they're saying, but you, like, can, function completely fine. I could accept quests. It would just display if the character's speaking common tongue. Like, it would just display common script, which is like an entirely different language. So really wouldn't be able to read the quest dialogue, but I could still accept the quest and stuff like that. I would need to learn the common skill in order to see it. Creature type denotes what the creature type is. This is referenced within the creature type enumerations. You can look this up right in the core here. You can see the different enumerations for creature type. In fact, I just realized I have to change VMaNGOS creature type. I set it to 1. I actually set 7. So take a look at VMaNGOS here. Mr. Defias Blackguard. I'm going to set his creature type to 7. Ooh, there we go. So yeah, Beast, Dragonkin, Demon Elemental, whatnot. Every race by default is humanoid, which is 7. The Wallcraft Scourge is actually listed as undead, so they would show up as undead and be affected by basically everything that affects undead via this column. Login effect. I'm not really certain what login effect is. Take a look here, see if we can find. So that seems to be deprecated with the later clients. Login effect spell ID. Okay, so when you log in, the like white flash around your character, it's descriptive of a spell, and that's probably listed in the spell template for some visual effect, which was deprecated later on in clients. So 836. That's login effect. Okay, yeah, so that's just pretty much a visual, spell visual that gets assigned. And I don't think it has any actual effects. It's probably just a dummy. 46 actually, so there is an effect. We'll take a look and see what that does. Spell effect 46 spawn. Spell effect spawn. Okay, so this is used for something within the core. I've never really explored this. If you have the effect spawn or effect insta-kill. So let's see, what does this do? Check creature templates if you have the spawn. Invalid spawn spell ID. I don't really know what it does though. Just looks like it checks if you have it and logs whether or not you don't. Strange. Huh. Yeah, either way that gets deprecated in later expansions seemingly. Unaltered visual. I'm not certain what that references either. Let's see. Combat stun spell. Is that what that is? Okay. So the little visual above your head when you're stunned in combat is possibly determined by this. Take a look at the spell template, see if we can figure that out. Yeah, dazed. So that visual while you're stunned, probably related to an animation as well as the visual above your head when you're stunned. It seems to be the same for everybody, though. Res Sickness. This is the Res Sickness spell. You can actually have individual spells for each race, which would be cool to actually customize each of the races here. So I could do like custom stun spell effects for each race, or custom Res Sickness for each race. This was originally intended because Res Sickness was basically automatically gained upon dying in early alpha. But they scrapped the idea for the graveyard system and whatnot. Splash sound. All of the races except for Dwarf have the same splash sound. If a Dwarf jumps in water, their sound is actually different than the others for whatever reason. They would probably have intended to expand upon this for each race having a different sound. I'm sure Tauren would have had a different sound, but that just never happened. So only Dwarf has it. Field 14 is starting taxi nodes. This is the taxi nodes that you automatically acquire upon creating your character. So this would be a string for the taxi nodes, probably referencing a mask. Seemingly, but I'm not too certain. In fact, if we plug this into rapid tables here, we'd probably take a look and see. Let's see what this converts to. Yeah, so this would be a mask for a taxi node. But yeah, so this is just basically when you start like a human, you automatically know the Stormwind taxi node. Orc knows the Orgrimmar, stuff like that, or Camp Taroho, whatever it is, Crossroads for Orc. Client file string is the string that's sent in the file for the client. So let's say like if you mouse over somebody, this is, or I'm sorry, if you mouse over somebody, this is what you'll see is the name. The client file string is used elsewhere for determining the race, and the client handles that. Cinematic sequence ID is used to play the intro cinematic for your race. So this is going to be enumerated in the cinematics DBC, which we'll have to get to next month. We're almost out of time here. Name, obviously, this is the displayed name. When you mouse over somebody, this is the name that gets displayed. And for this, the facial hair custom, the different customizations for hair and the two facial hairs, this denotes essentially the character selection screen creation, the text that gets displayed for the sliders. If it's normal, it's just going to be like hair or skin or whatnot. But if you are like, let's say, a undead, you're going to have features instead, because they have different features. They don't really have hair or piercings or anything like that. Tusks for troll, whatnot. Gnomes have earrings. Tauren has hair and horns. So this is just displaying for the sliders on character creation. So that's going to wrap up today's lesson. We did 3 hours here. We're going to continue next month with the DBCs. Of course, last Sunday of every month. 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And next month we're going to pick it up, and hopefully next month, within the next lesson, we can get the rest of them cleared. It's probably going to take 2 more lessons, but we're going to go through all the DBCs just so we have the information documented for all the client stuff. Either way, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for everybody for being here. Let me take a look at the chat real quick, make sure I wrap up any of the last questions here. It's 2023. Yeah, somebody's making jokes. I missed it though. And let's see. Alright, seems we wrapped up all the questions. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Much appreciated everybody for any of the information that you provided me in this lesson. Much appreciated Jamie. Huge shout out for sending me the Windows activation key. He is the lead developer of Turtle WoW. It's much appreciated. Thank you everybody for tuning in, and again, we'll pick it up next month, last Sunday of the month, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Y'all take care now.